Hello, everyone. This is Baika. Welcome to the Global Educators Show to a brand new episode. This is a show for parents and educators from all around the world to come together and talk about how to create a safe environment for the next generation. Because there are a lot of problems at home and at school, we're all here to talk about how we can overcome those problems. Today's episode is called Special Education. We have a lawyer here to talk about how you can protect your children if they run into any problems in the educational world. Frances Shefter is an education attorney and advocate who is committed to helping her clients have a stress-free IEP experience. She is also a mom, businesswoman, and a lawyer, as I mentioned, and here she is here to give advice and tips to parents about special education. First of all, thank you for coming on our show, and please share with us your mission and passion, and please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I love being able to share what I do. It is definitely a passion. My story in the nutshell, when I was younger, I didn't think I was smart enough to go to law school. And when I was younger, even in the States, there wasn't really special education. Like special education were for intellectually challenged, it wasn't the little bit of support needed. And so I went into education. I had my undergrad in early childhood, my master's in special ed. And then after 7 years in the classroom, I was a special ed coordinator, which is an administrative teaching position. And after 2 years of that, I realized I'm not making the difference I want to make. So as a result, I wound up, long story short, at law school. And so I always knew I would either work for the school system or for the families. And so that's where I am now at Shefter Law. We represent families. I hate saying against the school system because we like to be collaborative at first. We work with the school system to help get services for the children. But when necessary, we will file for litigation if we have to, if the school system isn't doing what we feel is appropriate for the child.
I love how you said you're not working against it. Also, our show here, we're not trying to go against any educational system or ideologies. We're out here to just come together and create an intersection for parents and teachers and administrators. And please just give a little bit more about your law firm. What is the main message and what is your mission and who inspired you to start your personal firm?
So, Schefter Law, we're based out of Rockville, Maryland. We provide legal services in Maryland, DC, and Florida. We are working on Virginia, but we can provide advocacy services nationwide as well as internationally at the American schools, because special education is a federal law. And I didn't discover that until we had somebody from Germany call us and ask. And so I researched, I'm like, oh, look, yeah, they do have to follow the law. So that's always good to know. The firm is all about education. I was a teacher. My story of growing up thinking I wasn't smart, because I couldn't spell, was a big motivator for me. I always laugh about it because I couldn't spell. My grammar wasn't great, but I was in law school and I was on law review. So clearly, those little skills weren't that necessary. My brain still worked in the analytical way it needed to be successful in law school and on law review. So I don't want other kids to go through what I went through. Like all of our brains work differently. I have, as you know, I have my own podcast. I have lots of learning materials on my website, my YouTube channel. I love to teach others. I always say I wish I didn't have a job because that would mean that parents could advocate for themselves and the schools were actually, they were all meeting of the minds and providing for the children what the children truly need. And I always say that in a way that I know teachers would do more if they could, but realistically, the resources aren't always there for the teachers as well. That's why I left education because I was like, it wasn't about me and the kids and teaching the kids. All the red tape and the bureaucracy, and everything like telling me what I had to do and you can't do this and you can't do that. I'm like, can you just let me teach? So it's
Right,
all about us working together for the kids, right?
right. I like how you are a lawyer, but you're an advocate for education because I am all about education and I love that about you. So let's talk about a little bit about your podcast. You said you have a lot of learning materials, and what is like a message that you want to give to the people out there through your podcast?
So the podcast, I just today, this week, I just did my 100th episode,
Wow.
which is really exciting. It started just as my cousin and I doing an episode, and it's kind of morphed into educating families of what's out there. As we all know, as parents, parenting is hard. We don't get a manual. Even if they did give us a manual, our kids would switch it up in a minute anyway. And so and then, add neurodiversity on top of it and where do we go? Who do we turn to? How do we have help? Everybody always says it takes a village, and it truly does take a village. So the podcast has become how to build your village, what's out there, what's available. I've had people from ABLE accounts, from special needs trusts, physical therapists, occupational therapists, tutors, psychologists, like from all walks of life just sharing their wisdom with our with my listeners of like, hey, did you know this is out there? Um, and I always say, like, if you're watching an episode or something, you're like, oh, I wish somebody would do something on this, please send me an email, shoot me a little message. I'm more than happy to find a guest on that topic. Or if you want to be a guest on my show, I'm always like, reach out, please. I love sharing the information with everyone.
Right. I love how your podcast is teaching parents how to build a village and how to build a community. You're also a community builder, which I love about you. And so, yeah, parenting does not come with a manual. I guess teaching does come with a manual, but like you said, children can always like flip things around. It's
Right.
always so unpredictable. Let's talk about special education. What is special education and why is IEP so important in the educational industry?
So special education in the States is under federal law, which is IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it's providing additional services and supports for kids that qualify for services. There's 13 categories in the states that they can qualify under. And it's basically the importance of an IEP. What I like to say is it's leveling the playing field. So our kids with special needs that learn differently, it's how are we adjusting the environment and how are we teaching them differently so that they have a fair chance at life as everybody else. Because as I said, like I was brought up thinking I wasn't smart enough because I couldn't spell and I couldn't do this. So like had I had supports and I was also a very slow reader. If I had supports when I was younger, it might have, turned out differently. I love my life the way it is. I wouldn't look for anything different, but like those are the things. Like the IEPs are putting in place, it's a legal binding contract between the school and the parents of what needs to be done for their child. And it's giving our children that it's evening off the playing field for them and giving them a chance.
I love how it's legal and it's like by law, it's enforced and it's
Mhm.
encouraged for schools and administrators to create individualized teaching styles and program. And I feel like creating an individual program is just not like a 1 day um, lesson planning. It's probably like a whole comprehensive thing. So it can't be like one teacher speaking up for it. It has to be the whole school, right? The administrators, they have
Right.
to step in, parents and teachers all have to kind of step in. So how can administrators also assist teachers in creating an inclusive environment?
So the biggest thing that I've seen is that a lot of times administrators don't necessarily understand special education or know special education. I've seen it too many times that administrators are, well, that behavior is not acceptable and the child needs to be punished. It's like, well, wait a minute. That behavior is because of a sensory need that's not being met. This is not punishing, suspending a child or giving them detention or giving them extra work or whatever it is you're doing isn't going to teach this child something different because it's not a conscious choice the child is making that you can change this behavior. This is okay, let's look at the basic of what is the need that we have that children, that needs to be met. And then looking at it from that stage, what can we put in place to help provide these kids the supports they need, and so that their sensory needs are being met in the classroom, in the school day. It's also just taking that step out and looking at what can we do as a school, as a community, to truly include all of these kids in our events. Some of our special needs kids have sensory issues and loud noises are too much. So maybe, realizing that and saying, okay, so when we do our pep rallies or we do our things in the auditorium, maybe we'll set up a quiet room with a Zoom so that those kids can participate via Zoom and not be overstimulated being in that, the big auditorium with everybody else. It's kind of thinking outside of the box of what can we do to support them and include them rather than just saying, oh, well, they don't have to go to they don't have to go. Well, no, they want to go and they want to be included. And what can we do to tweak things so that they can be included?
I like how you said that it's not a conscious choice. They're not deliberately trying to be destructive
Right.
or like be problematic, right? Some of the times they don't even know why they're acting a certain way. I feel like some
Yeah.
students just don't know why. Back to your teaching years, have you ever had a problem with classroom discipline?
Obviously, I had problems. I wasn't the perfect teacher. We all know that. There is no such thing as the perfect teacher. I have stories like I remember I had one child, I had twins, and one of the boys was clearly ADHD. Not that I'm a medical professional, but I mean, like, the kid was bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
And so with him, I realized, you know what I need to do? He was up changing my bulletin boards all the time. But you know what? And this was kindergarten, and he was changing my bulletin boards.
Oh,
But
wow.
at any point in time, yeah, at any point in time in my lesson, if I stopped and asked him a question, he knew the answer. And so that's what, like, he needed that extra something to do to get out to get out his energy and to have that distraction so that he could focus better, which I know is counterintuitive, but that's the way it is for some people. Just like some people say they can't read unless they have music in the background, or they can't study unless they have a TV on, like it's just that's how our brains work differently. Um, I remember my when I taught, so I was at an alternative middle and high school, and these were the tough kids. These were the kids that were basically told jail or school or juvenile detention because they were underage. So they were tough kids. And I remember one time I was covering a class, and it was like one of the toughest classes. And so I walked in and I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? Because these kids are going to eat me alive. Like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And I walked in, I'm like, okay, you all have an A right now. And they're all looking at me like, what? I'm like, you have an A right now. Now your job is to keep it. Can I tell you, those kids worked so hard to keep their A. And it was just that mind shift of you don't have to earn an A. You got it. You start with an A. Just keep it. And the kids were like, "You're not taking away my A. I'm gonna keep my A. What do I got to do to keep this?" And they were all working like, "Wait, Miss Shefter, I need your help over here." It was just one of those things of like being able to look at my class and looking at the kids and what do they need from me to be successful. Standing over them, telling them you have to do this worksheet and you have to do these problems was not going to work with these kids. They were like, whatever. So
Thank you. That was awesome. What are some
yeah.
tips for parents?
It's always such a challenge because, of course, I have two neurodiverse kids, and it's hard for me. I've done a lot of growth on myself and emotional regulation on myself, and realizing I like to say tap out, like when I need to tap out of like I just can't right now, and I walk away. I also do a lot of like reality with my kids of, you know what, mommy was a little harsh. I got triggered because this happened, and I think my punishment might have been a little bit harsh. So let's rediscuss what the punishment is. I did that, I've done a lot of classes and podcasts and positive parenting. I have a child with PDA, pathological demand avoidance, so we have to do a low demand household as much as possible. Um, but it's just, for parenting, learn your child and learn, is it truly a disciplinary thing that needs to be done, or is it a need that needs to be met that's not being met? Because I've found with my kids, a lot of times when they're being defiant, they don't necessarily want to be defiant, but for whatever reason, what's going on in their body and their brain right now, they can't do what I'm asking them to do. So how can we figure it out? Um, One of the things I use a lot is choices. Like, okay, fine. You don't want to brush your teeth? Totally fine. That means we need to throw away all candy and we need to stop drinking milk because that rots your teeth also. And no more sugar, no more, cake, ice cream, because all of that stuff rots your teeth. And if you're not going to brush your teeth, I don't want your teeth to rot. So this is the thing. Well, you know darn well she was in that bathroom in a heartbeat brushing her teeth. But like that's the thing. Give them a choice. Here's your choice. You have a choice. It's your choice. But obviously, you know which one they're going to choose.
Yeah. Give them a choice. That's wonderful. So for
Yeah.
people who may not be so familiar with neurodivergence or neurodiversity, could you like explain it to someone that may not be familiar with it? What is neurodiversity? What is a neurodivergent?
So neurodiversity is the term we use when brains work differently. That's how I always explained it to my children. When I went to get my children evaluated, they're like, why do I have to do this? I'm like, look, everybody's brain works differently, and we're going to figure out how your brain is working so that we can better support you. And so neurodiversity, it's all inclusive of all disabilities, of intellectual disability, autism, blindness kind of falls in there, because things need to be different. Um, but all of those different areas fall in together and they're kind of lumped together. And what do we need to do, to help these children thrive?
I was first teaching, I was unaware of different neurodiversities, and we don't really learn that in teachers' college. So I feel like this is probably an area that probably universities and the teacher colleges and teachers programs can also speak more about. I think the more we talk about it and more we share about this and just spread more awareness, people can also respect students or also like even coworkers, right, with
Yep.
neurodiversity, and parents can also take it seriously. And not that I want to bash Asian culture, it's not that common, I guess, they to talk about neurodiversity because nobody wants to be looked down on. But be labeling someone as neurodivergent is not, we're not discriminating. I think that's what I want to make clear with everyone.
The thing is with neurodiversity is to remember we all think and learn differently. Some kids do math well, some kids do English well. It doesn't matter, and that's what we have to look at. But I know what you mean with the culture of like, well, my kid, there's a lot of men are the same way of like, my kid's perfect. Like, what are you talking about? My kid's not different. My kid's, like, and they get that macho-ness to them. My son, is da 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 da. And it's, yeah, your son can be, but that's okay. Like, we just need to tweak how we interact with your child.
What are some mandatory requirements when it comes to special education in America?
One of the biggest thing is called child find. And that's that schools have a legal obligation to find children that might have a disability. So parents don't have to, hey, something's up with my kid. The schools are legally required. Schools are even legally required when the kids are at birth. It's birth through age 22. Schools are required, which is huge. And so a lot of parents, if you think about it, a lot of parents don't know, it's your first child. I don't know if my kid's neurodiverse. Is this normal? Is this not normal? And so we rely on doctors and we rely on everything else. But the school systems are supposed to do events and community and reach out, to find, children. And then there's just the whole process of, you know, once they identify that there's a potential, disability, then they have, time requirements of doing the evaluation, finding the child eligible, doing the IEP, reviewing the IEP every year, every 3 years revisiting eligibility and looking at whether assessments are needed again. There's so many, like the law is so broad, there's so much there, but like the biggest one is that parents, what I always say is on the parent side is, and for the teachers too, is that the parents and the teachers need to know the basics of the law in the sense of let's focus on the child and what we need to do to help the child because every child deserves the ability to reach their full potential. And how can help the child get to their full potential?
Yeah, I agree with the full potential. So what are some services or what are some examples that you help parents to have the basic knowledge of IEP laws?
So as I said, I have my YouTube channel, there's the podcast, and then there's also short 1 minute, 3-minute videos on everything on the process. We help families with all start stages of the game. Like from beginning to end, whether it's the school won't even evaluate, what do we need to do to get the school to evaluate? The school evaluated, but they're saying there's no educational impact. How can we get this child found eligible? Because a lot of times, like on that one, a lot of times schools are like, well, the kid's getting straight A's and is on grade level. And we're like, but the kid hasn't been in the classroom for 50% of the time. That's an educational impact. Just because they have good grades does not mean there's no educational impact. And it's we need to educate the schools sometimes that it's not just academics is not the only educational impact anymore. Um, yeah, and it's we help with placement when we feel that the child needs a more restrictive environment because being in the general education classroom isn't enough. They need more supports. The special ed classroom that they're being provided isn't enough. They need more supports than that. So the firm, what we do, we call our consultations, basically, we call them strategy sessions, because what they are is it's an hour with an attorney talking through everything that's going on with the child. We discuss all the issues and what the outcomes are for the family. And then we come up with a strategy of how to get there. And sometimes the strategy includes working with us. All right, we're going to sit with you. We're going to get through these meetings. And sometimes I'll say, look, you can hire us, but what your child really needs right now, put the money towards a tutor. Hire a good tutor. Even though the school's legally responsible, there's only so much a school can do in the hours that they have your child. And with dyslexia and dysgraphia, the schools don't have the time to really teach your child the way your child needs to learn. Yeah, a lot of tutors, at least in the States, and I'm sure where you are, Asia also, like everywhere, does it all online. And so one of the things I also like to pride the law firm is that we like to be a resource for families of like, hey, I need somebody that does XYZ. And anybody can call the firm and ask whoever's answering the phone, and whoever's answering the phone can go into our system. We have a very robust system of networking. And so can go in the system and say, oh, we need a physical therapist, and can pull up our list of all the physical therapists we know and shoot it off to whoever's calling. But yeah, these days, tutors, everybody's doing it online.
How can teachers make themselves more aware to different types of teaching styles? What are some like small tweaks that teachers can
So,
or make?
it's interesting because I remember so I did my undergrad in early childhood, and then I did my master's in special education. I went back and got certified. And I remember in my master's classes, the special education classes, learning like certain teaching techniques. And I'm like, why wasn't this taught in gen ed? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, this is a best practice to begin with. Like, why is it saved for just teaching to our neurodiverse kids, our special ed kids? Because, things like doing the breaks or breaking down things differently and task analysis and movement breaks and how we teach with mnemonics or with, teach with finger movements and stuff that we learn for special ed. If teachers were to do that in the gen ed classroom, like then we don't necessarily, I mean, you still have your individual education plan, but the teacher's working it into all of it. So, I always recommend for gen ed teachers, take a special ed class. Go talk to your special ed teacher, go observe one of your, the special ed classrooms and see what they do, and get some pointers for them. Because usually if you do that for the whole class, it's going to benefit everyone. It's you don't have to have special ed to benefit from all these extra, ways we teach and do things.
I love that. What are some more examples that you've helped parents with IEP and special education?
So, I touched on a little bit the educational impact. That's always a one that I get involved in a lot to fight of like, what is educational impact? Because unfortunately, schools think educational impact is that you're failing or you're below grade level. And that's not true anymore. That is one factor to consider, but that's not the only factor. We need to look at, is the child, reaching full potential? Is the child in the classroom? Is the child learning what's going on? What's going on socially? What's going on emotionally? Is the child available for learning? So that's one we've done. Also, just getting schools to evaluate in general. Schools like are just dead set against evaluating sometimes. And it's like, you know what, just do the evaluation. You know, a lot of times I'll still have like, I mean, I had this one case that the teacher was just, I don't care what the paper says. I don't care. This child is not special ed. She's getting all good grades. Um, and she's on grade level and da da da. Well, it was a third grade child with dyslexia and dysgraphia. And for those that don't know a lot about dyslexia and dysgraphia, dysgraphia is the writing portion of the dyslexia. Most people know the reading part. Um, the problem is that the kids are usually very, very bright and they know how to compensate. So they're getting good grades and getting where they are because they've used other skills to be able to adapt and compensate. And so when third grade and fourth grade hits, when curriculums get more difficult, at least in the States, that's when it starts coming out. Um, and so that was a case, again, it was fighting, fighting, fighting. And it wasn't until um, the psychologist started talking about the subtest scores of the academic subtest scores. And that's where the deviation was. Because the psychologist at one point said, well, standard deviation is 1 point. And in order to be eligible under learning disabilities, you have to have at least 1.5 standard deviation. So she's like, so any subtest scores that are below 7, so 6 or below, would be a discrepancy. And I said, oh, so spelling and reading fluency, and I forgot what the third one was, are all 6s. She goes, kids eligible. And that was that was it. Like the teacher still said not eligible, not eligible. And we're like, the rest of the school agreed with me and the psychologist because it's like the numbers don't lie. That's what the numbers are. Like, how can you say not eligible? I don't care what, but like that teacher had in her head that the kid was on grade level, so couldn't be eligible for special education.
That was a
So
wonderful
it's just,
example. Thank you for sharing.
uh,
And what is your one last message to parents and teachers regarding special education?
know that you're not alone and that we're all here. It's all about the kids and we're all here to support each other. And help build your community. Hopefully advocates and attorneys that are going into the school system with the teachers. I tell the teachers all the time, look, it's not you. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. It just might not be the right fit. And just know that, like, it's not anything personal. If I go up against you or others go up against you, it's just this is not what's working for this child. And it's just like what I like to say is um, it's like a shirt. I don't like that shirt. That shirt doesn't work for me. There's nothing wrong with the shirt. It's just not a good fit for me. Somebody else it'll be a great fit for. And so that's what I like to try to say with teachers. It's like it's just not a good fit. And that's okay.
Thank you all for joining in and see you in our next video. Goodbye till then.